and welcome to Podvault.ca. What is Podvault, you ask? It's my company. And under this banner, I operate 4 podcasts and I promote the books that I write. The podcasts that I do are called Passports and Postcards, Red Light Conversations, Randy Rugby Podcast, and The Rest of Your Story. Each one of these podcasts is different than the others. However, they are topics that I find most interesting, and I like to have guests on the show that can talk about whether it be travel, whether it be about rugby, or whether it be about where they are today and how they got there with my new podcast called The Rest of Your Story. Now, it does take a lot of time to do these podcasts. It takes hours and hours when you're looking for guests, vetting guests, scheduling, getting your guest on to do a podcast, recording, downloading, editing, and uploading to whatever host you have. And then from there, have it scheduled to be released or have it published immediately. So those are some of the things that take up time. Also, when you start to promote the show, that will take some time too. What I normally do with the shows, especially with Passports and Postcards, is a week before the show is released, I'll create a soundbite, a visual audio soundbite to share and sort of encourage people to give it a listen when it's released the following Saturday. Red Light Conversations is a different beast in its own because I broadcast that or I record it based on events of the day that may have touched me. It's called Red Light Conversations because it's things that come to you at a red light. You may not want to stop there at the red light to do your podcast, but it's those thoughts that you think about and go, that'd be a good subject to talk about today. So then I get on and I talk about whatever the event may be. Now, when you're looking at Randy Rugby Podcast, now I've been told you shouldn't have podcast in the name of your podcast. However, I like the sound of it. And with Randy Rugby Podcast, it's dedicated to rugby leagues here in Canada. So currently we have the Toronto Arrows playing in the MLR, which is Major League Rugby in North America. Their season just wrapped up. They were on the road for almost 2 years, came home with a record of 5-11. Next year is going to be much better because I see sports coming back to Canada to be playing here. Now the Toronto Arrows played all their home games in Atlanta, and they were on the road in the States for the rest of their games. So I couldn't be there, so why not try to discuss it in podcasts? Then I decided to create my 4th podcast, which is called The Rest of Your Story. And that is basically looking at people that we know today or that I may know today, and I know what they're doing, but I want to know how they got there. Any challenges they've overcome, any opportunities that were presented to them that they grabbed and enabled them to get where they are today. So those 4 podcasts are housed under the name Podvault.ca. I also promote my books, which are available on Amazon. I have 3 books there. One is called A September to Remember. It's about being in England, Ireland, and France around the time of the September 11th attacks. And the other book is called Gonzalo Guerrero, Travel Insights with Randall McEwen. It's a travel-based book dealing with 2 destinations I visited. One of them was the beautiful and wonderful island of Antigua Barbuda. And the second part of the book deals with a trip to Cancun, Mexico, and my experiences there. The 3rd book is actually designed for Kindle. And that one is a user's guide, how to use Anchor to create a free podcast This is for newbies in podcasting who just want to give it a try. Now, some of the information within that book has changed a little bit as things have advanced, but overall, it would give you a quick start on how to create your first podcast. I'm also here to help new podcasters. So if you're a new podcaster, you're thinking about doing a podcast and you want to know the ins and outs, at least what I know, I call it street smarts. Although I'll be honest with you, through being involved in a social audio app called the Clubhouse, I built quite the tribe there in podcasting industry. And they've shared with me tips and tricks on how to make my podcast better. I've learned the type of equipment that I need to have to do a podcast. And from that, I've seen my podcast go from, right from the beginning where they were iffy to the podcasts I have now where they are top notch, great quality and great guests. Now, you ask about how far have I gone with my podcast? I will say that my podcasts have been heard on every continent, in about 80 countries, and over 800 unique cities. So when I started off, my very first podcast back in June of 2020, when we were under this pandemic, my idea was if I got one listener, I'd be happy. But now I have listeners around the world, and they seem to be enjoying it. And I enjoy doing podcasts, to be honest with you. To me, it's a passion. It's not just, I wouldn't call it a hobby right now. It's my passion. So from there, I hope you will check out Podvault.ca. Check out the podcasts. They're available wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, or some of the other platforms such as iHeartRadio, Pandora. Just they're everywhere. If you're looking to start a podcast and you want some help, reach out to me and get information about me on my website at Podvault.ca. And I thank you for listening. And I just want to say, podcasting, I never thought I'd be where I am today. But you have to, if you're thinking about doing it, stop thinking about it and just do it. Need help? Reach out. Have a wonderful evening. Take care.